Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. The time is 10:16 a.m. on Monday, the 16th of February, 2026. There's a lot of sixes in today's momentary space-time continuum. But anyway, harmonic resonance. Harmonic resonance, people of Earth. So, I feel a bit depressed today, actually. It's been a grumbling depression for a few weeks, actually. I think that's what's gone wrong. That compounded with the dreadful heat and then being quite cold the last few days, comparatively cold to how hot it was. And then this morning I woke up and it was sunny, but like as I described when I wrote about it on Facebook, like the light was being drained through a colander. And now it's overcast again, but there's still quite a bit of a radiating light behind the clouds, so the sun might come out again. But the weather's very strange, and I feel very strange because I'm actually very sensitive to energy and fluctuations in weather. I'm probably not the only one that's sensitive, but it's just that I'm conscious that I'm sensitive to it because I'm old now and I've gotten used to how my body somatizes and reacts to fluctuations in resonance, vibration, frequency, hot and cold, and the moods can travel along with that. And I don't know how I can alter that, actually. It seems to just be the way my brain's wired. Highly sensitive person. Must be nice to be like an NPC and just shuffle through life and have no emotions and feel nothing and see nothing and just eat, sleep and shit and fuck and get through your day, and you're just an automaton. Even when at my worst, and I was very, very ill, when I was on heavy psych meds, I still deep inside was taking everything in and sensating everything and dulled it down or suppressed it or numbed down because of all the abuse dynamics. But I could see it all playing out in front of me, and my so-called friends and then lover would look at me and think, she's just a mental patient. They can do whatever we like to her. She won't care. I actually thought they could get away with it. No one gets away with anything, people of Earth. Not even me. The sword of Damocles swings both ways. And every dog has their day. Give it enough time and enough healing and enough recalibration from the shock and the horror. We all blow life back into ourselves eventually. And it's been real, it's been painful, it's been chilling, it's been harrowing, watching the devolution of my species and Western civilization as we thought we knew it, but never really did, because we were fed on lies and deception the entire time via our education systems and big pharma and the whole gamut. But here we are, another day in paradise, and it's up to us whether we make it a paradise or a hellscape. So today, just for today, maybe just for this morning, because I could change my feelings about that in a few hours' time, we'll call it paradise. Because it's windy, but it's a bit cooler, and the day holds potential. The day holds potential, and the mama tea holds potential. And Kermie's very talkative this morning. Good morning, Kermie. Would you like to tell the people of Earth that you're very frustrated and you want to go out in the garden, and it's not raining, so technically you could go out in the garden? Is that what you'd like? All right, we'll read the story to the people of Earth, and then we'll go out in the garden if it doesn't rain. Okay? He's like, I'm very interested in this notion of going out into the garden. Yes, and then you can see all the wild birdies, and they can come and see you, and then you'll feel like a real birdie again, because it's not good to be isolated in, the studio, the back bedroom, seeing nothing, going nowhere, not interacting with any other life forms, except a mama too. Gets a bit boring for birdies, doesn't it? Yes. My sweet little babies. Right, let's continue with chapter 6 of Birds, Beasts and Relatives. The olive merry-go-round. An olive merry-go-round. By May, the olive picking had been in progress for some time. The fruit had plumped and ripened throughout the hot summer days, and now it fell and lay shining in the grass like a harvest of black pearls. The peasant women appeared in droves carrying tins and baskets on their heads. They would then crouch in circles around the base of the olive tree, chattering as shrilly as sparrows as they picked up the fruit and placed it in the containers. Right, my ears are watery, it's weird. I really don't feel well. But it's very rare that I actually feel reasonably well or even great, so we'll just go with the flow. It is what it is, people of Earth. Some of the olive trees had been producing crops like this for 500 years. And for 500 years, the peasants had been gathering the olives in precisely the same way. I'm surprised, because I would have thought that you'd pick them off the tree, but they wait till they fall down from the tree. Similar to like macadamia nuts too. Interesting. It was a great time for gossip and for laughter. I used to move from tree to tree, joining the different groups, squatting on my haunches, helping them pick up the glossy olives, hearing gossip about all the relatives and friends of the olive pickers, and occasionally joining them as they ate under the trees, wolfing down the sour black bread and the little flat cakes wrapped in vine leaves that were made out of last season's dried figs. Sounds nice too. Songs would be sung, and it was curious that the peasants' voices, so sour and raucous in speech, could be plaintively sweet when raised in harmony together. At that time of year, with the yellow waxy crocuses just starting to bubble up among the olive roots, and the banks purple with campanulas, campanulas, don't know. presume it's some kind of purplish flower. The peasants gathered under the trees, looked like a moving flower bed, and the songs would echo down the naves between the ancient olives. The sound as melancholy and as sweet as goat bells. When the containers were piled high with the fruit, they would be hoisted up, and we would carry them down to the olive press in a long, chattering line. The olive press, a gaunt, gloomy building, was down in a valley through which ran a tiny, glittering stream. The press was presided over by Papa Demetrios, a tough old man, as twisted and bent as the olive trees themselves, with a completely bald head and an enormous moustache, snow white, except where it was stained yellow by nicotine, and reputed to be the biggest moustache in the whole of Corfu. Papa Demetrios was a gruff, bad-tempered old man, but for some reason he took a fancy to me, and we got along splendidly. He even allowed me into the Holy of Holies itself, the olive press. Here was a great circular trough like an ornamental fish pond, and mounted in it a gigantic grindstone with a central strut of wood jutting from it. This strut was harnessed to Papa Demetrios's ancient horse, which, with a sack over its head so that it did not get giddy, would circle the trough, thus rolling the great grindstone round and round so that it could crush the olives as they were poured into it in a glinting cascade. As the olives were crushed, a sharp, sour smell rose in the air. The only sounds were the solid ploddings of the horses' hooves, and the rumbling of the great grindstone, and the steady drip, drip of the oil trickling out of the vents of the trough, golden as distilled sunlight. It's very windy again, but it's blowing a cyclone in Wellington. My friend Sally posted videos of her back veranda and all the trees being beaten up by the wind. It was, well, it's how I remember it when in my childhood. But anyway, don't miss that, to be honest. Bitter cold southerly winds. Unusual for it to be in February though. Well, something's changed with our planet in more ways than one, darlings. In one corner of the press was a huge black crumbling mound that was the residue from the grinding, the crushed seeds, pulp and skin of the olives, forming black crusty cakes like coarse peat. It had a rich, sweet, sour smell that almost convinced you it was good to eat. It was in fact fed to the cattle and horses with their winter food, and it was also used as a remarkably efficient, if somewhat over-pungent, fuel. Papa Demetrios, because of his bad temper, was left severely alone by the peasants, who would deliver their olives and depart from the press with all speed. For you were never certain whether anybody like Papa Demetrios might not have the evil eye. In consequence, what it really was he was old and alone. So they fucking persecute you further. Human beings are cunts. Most of them. Every now and then you find a good person, but they're rare. Rare as hen's teeth. Anyway, I mustn't be bitter. I've had a good innings, 60 3/4 years. Much longer than I would have anticipated even as a child, so it's just it's a seeping wound to see the atrophy and the ignominy and the declension and the disappointment and the despair. And we read stories to comfort ourselves because we know there's a different world being born, and we're helping birth it just by holding our line, remaining calm and sanguine, and remembering a different world that could still be and should still be and might still be, whether I'm here to see it or not. In consequence, the old man was lonely, and so he welcomed my intrusion into his domain. From me, he would get all the local gossip, who had given birth, and whether it was a boy or a girl, who was courting whom, and sometimes a more juicy item, such as that Pepe Condos had been arrested for smuggling tobacco. In return for my acting as a sort of newspaper for him, Papa Demetrios would catch specimens for me. Sometimes it would be a pale pink gulping gecko, or a praying mantis, or the caterpillar of an oleander hawk moth, striped like a Persian carpet, pink and silver and green. It was Papa Demetrios who got me one of the most charming pets that I had at that time, a spade-footed toad, which I christened Augustus Tickletummy. I had been down in the olive groves, helping the peasants, and I started to feel hungry. I knew that Papa Demetrios always kept a good supply of food at the olive press, so I went down to visit him. Children, they know how to survive. I used to do the same. Go where the good food was, where I was welcomed and where I felt loved. Only one household during my childhood I truly felt welcomed and loved, and that was in the home of Mrs. June Robertson. Who fed me remarkably well, might add, but it wasn't just about the food. It was the kindness and the tenderness and the nurturance. And she admired my defiant little spirit and my innate intelligence. I was more intelligent as a child than I am now. Trauma's dulled me, or 15 years of psych meds dulled me, and I got broken too many times, but I was quite a little sparkling little Catherine Wheel as a child. It's a pity that people were so vicious to destroy that. It really is. But on we go and on we go. As I said in a video the other day, you can count your friends on one hand, and even if there's only one. In my childhood, the only real true friend, I guess, well, I hadn't come to that gnosis, was Mrs. June Robertson. Anyway, I had been down in the olive groves helping the peasants, and I started to feel hungry. I knew that Papa Demetrios always kept a good supply of food at the olive press, so I went down to visit him. It was a sparkling day with a rumbustious, laughing wind that thrummed through the olive grove like a harp. There was a nip in the air, so I ran all the way with the dogs leaping and barking about me, and I arrived flushed and panting to find Papa Demetrios crouched over a fire that he had constructed out of slabs of olive cake. "Ah," he said, glaring at me fiercely. "So you've come, have you? Where have you been? I haven't seen you for 2 days. I suppose now spring is here, you've got no time for an old man like me." I explained that I had been busy with a variety of things, such as making a new cage for my magpies, since they had just raided Larry's room and stood in peril of their lives if they were not incarcerated. Said Papa Demetrios. "Ah, well, do you want some corn?" I said, as nonchalantly as I could, that there was nothing I would like better than corn. He got up and strutted bow-legged to the olive press and reappeared carrying a large frying pan, a sheet of tin, a bottle of oil, and 5 golden brown cobs of dried maize, like bars of bullion. He put the frying pan on the fryer and scattered a small quantity of oil into it, and then waited until the heat of the fire made the oil purr and twinkle and smoke gently in the bottom of the pan. Then he seized a cob of maize and twisted it rapidly between his arthritic hands, so that the golden beads of corn pattered into the pan with a sound like rain on a roof. He put the flat sheet of tin over the top, gave a little grunt, and sat back, lighting a cigarette. "Have you heard about Andreas Papouyakis?" he asked, running his fingers through his luxurious moustache. "No," I said I had not heard. "Ah," he said with relish. "He's in hospital, that foolish one." I said I was sorry to hear it because I liked Andreas. He was a gay, kind-hearted, exuberant boy who inevitably managed to do the wrong things. They said of him in the village that he would ride a donkey backwards if he could. What, I inquired, was his affliction? "Dynamite," said Papa Demetrios, waiting to see my reaction. I gave a slow whistle of horror and nodded my head slowly. Papa Demetrios, now assured of my undivided attention, settled himself more comfortably. This was how it happened, he said. He's a foolish boy, Andreas is, you know. His head is as empty as a winter swallow's nest. But he's a good boy, though. He's never done anybody any harm. Well, he went dynamite fishing. You know that little bay down near Benitez? Well, he took his boat there because he had been told that the country policeman had gone farther down the coast for the day. Of course, foolish boy, he never thought to check and make sure that the policeman was farther down the coast. I clicked my tongue sorrowfully. The penalty for dynamite fishing was 5 years in prison and a heavy fine. Now, said Papa Demetrios. He got into his boat and was rowing slowly along when he saw ahead of him in the shallow water a big shoal of barbuni. He stopped rowing and lit the fuse on his stick of dynamite. Papa Demetrios paused dramatically, peered at the corn to see how it was doing, and lit another cigarette. That would have been all right, he went on. But just as he was about to throw the dynamite, the fish swam away, and what do you think that idiot of a boy did? Still holding the dynamite, he rowed after them. Bang! I said I thought that there could not be very much left of Andreas. Oh, yes, said Papa Demetrios scornfully. He can't even dynamite properly. 'Twas such a tiny stick, all it did was blow off his right hand. But even so, he owes his life to the policeman who hadn't gone farther down the coast. Andreas managed to row to the shore, and there he fainted from loss of blood, and he would undoubtedly have died if the policeman, having heard the bang, had not come down to the shore to see who was dynamiting. Luckily, the bus was just passing, and the policeman stopped it, and they got Andreas into it and into the hospital. That was very lucky indeed, actually. Dumb luck. It's amazing how idiots get lucky and Mama T struggles through life. Unluckily, as the case may be, I'm not always unlucky. I've been given great gifts, like the gift of the air conditioner and the gift of the washing machine and other gifts, someone paying for private medical treatment and CPAP therapy. Stopped breathing two times an hour last night. It's probably why I feel a bit ragged, but that person tries to keep me alive. God is bless. So no, it's not true that I'm unlucky. I'm loved and I'm cared for in quite astonishing and miraculous ways. But I wouldn't go dynamite fishing and push my luck that far, because I might have blown off more than a hand. By the gods. I said I thought it was a great pity that it should happen to anybody as nice as Andreas, but he was lucky to be alive. I presumed that, when he was better, he would be arrested and sent to Vido for 5 years. No, no, said Papa Dimitrios. The policeman said he thought Andreas had been punished quite enough, so he told the hospital that Andreas had caught his hand in some machinery. That was kind, by the gods. 5 years in prison would have been harsh given he lost his hand. The corn had now started to explode, banging onto the tin like the explosions of miniature cannons. Papa Dimitrios lifted the pan off the fire and took the lid off. There was each grain of corn exploded into a little yellow and white cumulus cloud, crunchy and delicious. Papa Dimitrios took a twist of paper from his pocket and unwrapped it. It was full of coarse grains of grey sea salt. Grey sea salt. And into this we dipped the little clouds of corn and scrunched them up with relish. I've got something for you, said the old man at last, wiping his moustache carefully with a large red and white handkerchief. Another one of those terrible animals that you are so eager to get. Stuffing my mouth with the remains of the popcorn and wiping my fingers on the grass, I asked him eagerly what it was. I'll fetch it, he said, getting to his feet. It's a very curious thing. I've never seen one like it before. I waited impatiently while he went into the olive press and reappeared carrying a battered tin, the neck of which he had stuffed with leaves. There you are, he said. Be careful because it smells. I pulled out the plug of leaves and peered into the tin and discovered that Papa Dimitrios was quite right. It smelt as strongly of garlic as a peasant bus on market day. In the bottom was crouched a medium-sized, rather smooth-skinned, greenish-brown toad with enormous amber eyes and a mouth set in a perpetual but rather insane grin. Hard to grin with enormous eyes open. Let's try that again, Sam. Yes, that does look insane, doesn't it? I'm glad I'm not a toad. It's not nice when people look at you and treat you as if you're insane. Ask me how I know. As I put my hand into the tin to pick him up, he ducked his head between his forelegs, retracted his protuberant eyes into his skull in the odd way that toads have, and uttered a sharp bleating cry, rather like that of a miniature sheep. I lifted him out of the tin, and he struggled violently, exuding a terrible odour of garlic. I noticed that on each hind foot he had a horny black excrescence, blade-shaped, like a ploughshare. I was delighted with him, for I had spent a considerable amount of time and energy trying to track down spade-footed toads without success. Thanking Papa Dimitrios profusely, I carried him home triumphantly, and installed him in an aquarium in my bedroom. I'm going to go back to bed when I finish this story, people of Earth. I feel like hell. I really do. Well, sometimes I perk up, don't I, birdie boys? Yes, the Mama T, when she perks up, can be quite astonishing. Doing the mosh on 2 or 3 Jack Daniels, living her best life, pissing off what she thought were people who loved her and her enemies simultaneously, leaving my body in full trance, whistling myself back down, spinning on a dime that no one gives me for my time and effort. What do I care? Living my very best life, people of Earth. My very best life. And I do have souls that love me. Unfortunately, most of them are in the other world, so it gets a bit strange. Who's that truck driving down here? Looks like a carpenter or tradesman of some kind. I had placed earth and sand to a depth of 2 or 3 inches at the bottom of the aquarium, and Augustus, having been christened and released, immediately set to work to build himself a home. With a curious movement of his hind legs, working backwards, using the blades of his feet as spades, he very rapidly dug himself a hole and disappeared from view, with the exception of his protuberant eyes and grinning face. Smile, you're on candid camera. Augustus, I soon discovered, was a remarkably intelligent beast and had many endearing traits of character which made themselves apparent as he got tamer. When I went into the room, he would scuttle out of his hole and make desperate endeavours to reach me through the glass walls of the aquarium. If I took him out and placed him on the floor, he would hop round the room after me, and then, if I sat down, would climb laboriously up my leg until he reached my lap, where he would recline in a variety of undignified attitudes, basking in the heat of my body, blinking his eyes slowly, grinning up at me, and gulping. It was then that I discovered he liked to lie on his back and have his stomach gently massaged by my forefinger. And so, from this unusual behaviour, he derived the surname of Tickle Tummy. He would also, I learned, sing for his food. If I held a large, writhing earthworm over the top of the aquarium, Augustus would go into paroxysms of delight, his eyes seeming to protrude more and more with excitement, and he would utter a series of little pig-like grunts, and the strange bleating cry he had given when I first picked him up. When the worm was finally dropped in front of him, he would nod his head vigorously, as if in thanks, grab one end of it, and proceed to stuff it into his mouth with his thumbs. Yes, well, they do sort of have thumbs, don't they? Whenever we had any guests, they were treated to an Augustus Tickle Tummy recital, and they all agreed, gravely, that he had the best voice and repertoire of any toad they had met. It was it was around about this time that Larry introduced Donald and Max into our life. Max was an immensely tall Austrian with curly blonde hair, a blonde moustache perched like an elegant butterfly on his lip, and intensely blue and kindly eyes. Donald, on the other hand, was short and pale-faced, one of those Englishmen who give you a first impression of being not only inarticulate, but completely devoid of personality. Larry had run into this ill-assorted couple in the town and had lavishly invited them up to have drinks. The fact that they arrived, mellowed by a variety of alcoholic stimuli, at 2 o'clock in the morning did not strike any of us as being particularly curious, since by that time we were inured or almost inured to Larry's acquaintances. Mother had gone to bed early with a severe cold, and the rest of the family had also retired to their rooms. I was the only member of the household awake. The reason for this was that I was waiting for Ulysses to return to the bedroom from his nightly wanderings and devour his supper of meat and minced liver. As I lay there reading, I heard a dim, blurred sound echoing through the olive groves. I thought at first it was a party of peasants returning late from a wedding and took no notice. Then the cacophony grew closer and closer, and from the clop and jingle accompanying it, I realised it was some late-night revellers passing on the road below in a cab. The song they were singing did not sound particularly Greek, and I wondered who they could be. I got out of bed and leaned out the window, staring down through the olive groves. At that moment, the cab turned off the road and started up the long drive towards the house. I could see it quite clearly because whoever was sitting in the back had apparently lighted a small bonfire. I watched this, puzzled and intrigued, as it flickered and shook through the trees on its way up to us. At that moment, Ulysses appeared out of the night sky like a silently drifting dandelion clock, and endeavoured to perch on my naked shoulder. Ouch, that would hurt. I shook him off and went and fetched his plate of food, which he proceeded to peck and gobble at, uttering tiny throaty noises to himself and blinking his brilliant eyes at me. By this time, the cab had made slow but steady progress and had entered the forecourt of the house. I leaned out the window, enraptured by the sight. Excuse me. It was not as I had thought, a bonfire in the back of the cab. There were two individuals sitting there, each clasping an enormous silver candelabra, in which had been stuck some of the great white candles that one normally brought bought to put in the church of Saint Spiridion. They were singing loudly and untunefully, but with great panache, a song from the Maid of the Mountains, endeavouring, wherever possible, to harmonise. The cab rolled to a halt at the steps that led up to the veranda. "At 17, sighed a very British baritone. "At 17, intoned the other singer in a rather heavy Middle European accent. "He falls in love quite madly," said the baritone, waving his candelabra about wildly. "With eyes of tender blue." "Tender blue," intoned the Middle European accent, giving a lechery to these simple words that had to be heard to be believed. "At 25, continued the baritone. "He thinks he's got it badly." "Badly," said the Middle European accent dolefully. "With eyes of different hue," said the baritone, making such a wild gesture with his candelabra that the candles sped out of their sockets like rockets and fell sizzling onto the grass. My bedroom door opened, and Margot, clad in yards of lace and what appeared to be butter muslin, came in. "What on earth's that noise?" she asked in a hoarse, accusing whisper. "You know Mother's not well." I explained that the noise was nothing whatsoever to do with me, but apparently we had company. Margot leaned out the window and peered down at the cab where the singers had just reached the next verse of their song. "I say," she called in muted tones, "do you mind not making quite so much noise? My mother's sick." Immediate silence enveloped the cab, and then a tall, gangling figure rose unsteadily to his feet. He held his candelabra aloft and gazed earnestly up at Margot. "Must not, dear lady," he intoned sepulchrally, "must not disturb Mother." "No, by Jove," agreed the English voice from the interior of the cab. "Who do you think they are?" Margot whispered to me in agitation. I said that to me the thing was perfectly clear. They must be friends of Larry's. "Are you friends of my brother's?" Margot fluted out the window. "A noble being," said the tall figure, waving the candelabra at her. "He invited us for drinks." Just a minute, I'll come down," said Margot. "To look you closer would be to fulfill the ambition of a lifetime," said the tall man, bowing somewhat uncertainly. "See you closer," corrected a quiet voice from the back of the cab. "I'll go downstairs," said Margot to me, "and get them inside and keep them quiet. You go and wake Larry." I pulled on a pair of shorts, picked up Ulysses unceremoniously, who, with half-closed eyes, was digesting his food, and went to the window and threw him out. "Extraordinary," said the tall man, watching Ulysses fly away over the moon-silvered olive tops. "Dislike the house of Dracula, no, Donald?" "By Jove, yes," said Donald. I pattered down the corridor and burst into Larry's room. It took me some time to shake him awake, for, under the firm impression that Mother had been breathing her cold germs over him, he had taken the precaution of consuming half a bottle of whisky before he went to bed. Eventually he sat up blearily and looked at me. "What the bloody hell do you want?" he inquired. I explained about the two characters in the cab and that they had said they had been invited to drinks. "Oh, Christ," said Larry. "Just tell them I've gone to Dubrovnik." I explained that I could not very well do this, as by now Margot would have lured them into the house, and that Mother, in her fragile condition, must not be disturbed. Groaning, Larry got out of bed and put on his dressing gown and slippers, and together we went down the creaking stairs to the drawing room. Here we found Max, lanky, flamboyant, good-natured, sprawled in a chair, waving his candelabra at Margot, all the candles of which had gone out. Donald sat hunched and gloomy in another chair, looking like an undertaker's assistant. "Your eyes, they are tender blue," said Max, waving a long finger at Margot. "We was singing about blue eyes, were we not, Donald?" "We were singing about blue eyes," said Donald. "That's what I said," said Max benevolently. "You said was," said Donald. Max thought about this for a brief moment. "Anyway," he says, "the eyes was blue." "Were blue," said Donald. "Oh, there you are," said Margot breathlessly as Larry and I came in. "I think these are friends of yours, Larry." "Larry!" bellowed Max, lurching up with the ungainly grace of a giraffe. "We have come like you told us." "How very nice," said Larry, forcing his sleep-crumpled features into something approaching an ingratiating smile. "Do you mind keeping your voice down, because my mother's sick?" "Mothers," said Max, with immense conviction, "are the most important thing in the world." He would have said sing in the world, because Germans. But never mind, we won't bother correcting the accentuations of the author's rendition of Max. But we just did, so there is that. Dear Goddess. He turned to Donald, laid a long finger across his moustache and said, "Shh," with such violence that Roger, who had sunk into a peaceful sleep, immediately leapt to his feet and started barking wildly. Whittle and Puke joined in vociferously. "Damned bad form, that," observed Donald between the barks. "Guest should not make his host's dogs bark. Also shouldn't turn up pissed at 2 a.m. in the morning." I would have given them a short bloody shift. Well, it was the 30s and people were a bit more amenable to pissheads in the day. I wonder why. Because everyone was on the terps, that's why. Anyway, Max went down on his knees and engulfed the still barking Roger in his long arms, a manoeuvre that I viewed with some alarm, since Roger, I felt, was quite capable of misinterpreting it. "Hush, Bow Wow," said Max, beaming into Roger's bristling and belligerent face. To my astonishment, Roger immediately stopped barking and started to lick Max's face extravagantly. "Would you, like a drink?" said Larry. "I can't ask you to stop long, of course, because unfortunately my mother's ill." Very civil of you, said Donald. Very civil indeed. I must apologise for him. A foreigner, you know. Well, I think I'll just go back to bed, said Margot, edging tentatively towards the door. No, you won't, Larry barked. Somebody's got to pour out the drinks. Do not, said Max, reclining on the floor with Roger in his arms and gazing at her piteously. Do not remove those eyes from my orbit. Well, I'll go and get the drinks then, said Margot breathlessly. And I will help you, said Max, casting Roger from him and leaping to his feet. Roger had been under the misguided impression that Max had intended to spend the rest of the night cuddling him in front of the dying fire, and so was not unnaturally put out when he was thrown aside like this. He started barking again. The door of the drawing-room burst open, and Leslie, stark naked except for a shotgun under his arm, made his appearance. "What the bloody hell's going on?" he asked. "Leslie, do go and put some clothes on," said Margot. "These are friends of Larry's." "Oh, God," said Leslie dismally. "Not more." He turned and made his way back upstairs. "Drinks," said Max, rapturously seizing Margot in his arms and waltzing her round to the accompaniment of almost hysterical barks on the part of Roger. "I do wish you would try to be more quiet," said Larry. "Max, for Christ's sake!" "Damned bad form," said Donald. "Remember my mother?" said Larry, since this reference had obviously struck a chord in Max's soul. Immediately he ceased waltzing with the breathless Margot and came to a halt. "Where is your mother?" he inquired. "The lady is sick. Take me to her that I may secure her." "Sucker," said Donald. "I'm here," said Mother in a slightly nasal tone of voice from the doorway. "What is going on?" She was clad in her nightie and wearing, for reasons of her cold, a voluminous shawl over her shoulders. She carried under one arm the drooping, panting, apathetic figure of Dodo, her dandy Dinmont terrier. "Why, you're just in time, Mother," said Larry. "I want you to meet Donald and Max." With the first sign of animation that he had shown, Donald rose to his feet, marched swiftly across the room to Mother, seized her hand, and gave a slight bow over it. "Enchanted," he said. "Terribly sorry about the disturbance. My friend, you know. Continental." "How nice to see you," said Mother, summoning up all her resources. At her entrance, Max had thrown his arms wide and was now gazing upon her with all the devoutness of a crusader catching his first sight of Jerusalem. "Mother," he intoned dramatically. "You are the mother." "How do you do?" said Mother, uncertainly. "You are?" Max asked, getting his facts straight. "The sick mother?" "Oh, it's just a bit of a cold," said Mother, deprecatingly. "We have woke you," said Max, clasping his breast, his eyes brimming with tears. "Awoken or woken?" said Donald, sotto voce. "Come," said Max, and put his long arms round Mother and ushered her to a chair near the fire, pressing her into it with the utmost delicacy. He took off his coat and spread it gently about her knees. And then he squatted by her side, took her hand and peered earnestly into her face. "What?" he inquired. "Does Mother want?" "An uninterrupted night's sleep," said Leslie, who had just returned, more conventionally garbed, in a pair of pyjama trousers and sandals. "Max," said Donald sternly, "stop monopolizing the conversation. Remember what we have come for?" "Of course," said Max delightedly. "We have wonderful news, Larry. Donald has decided to become an author." "Had to," murmured Donald modestly. "Seeing all you chaps living in the lap of luxury, royalties pouring in, felt I must try my hand at it." "That's jolly good," said Larry, with a certain lack of enthusiasm. I've just completed my first chapter," said Donald, "and so we came out hot-foot, as it were, so that I could read it to you." "Oh, God," said Larry, horrified. "No, Donald, really. My critical faculties are completely dehydrated at 2:30 in the morning. Can't you leave it here and I'll read it tomorrow?" "It's short," said Donald, taking no notice of Larry and producing a small sheet of paper from his pocket. "But I think you will find the style interesting." Larry gave an exasperated sigh, and we all sat back and listened expectantly while Donald cleared his throat. "Suddenly," he began in a deep, vibrant voice, "suddenly, there he was, and then suddenly, there was, suddenly, and suddenly he looked at her, suddenly, and she suddenly looked at him. Suddenly, she suddenly opened her arms. Suddenly, and he opened his arms. Suddenly. Then suddenly they came together, and suddenly, you could feel the warmth of her body. And suddenly, she could feel the warmth of his mouth on hers, as they suddenly fell on the couch together. There was a long pause while we waited for Donald to go on. He gulped once or twice, as though overcome with emotion at his own writing, folded the piece of paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. "What do you think?" he inquired of Larry. "Well, it's a bit short," said Larry cautiously. "Ah, but what do you think of the style?" said Donald. "Well, it's interesting," said Larry. "I think you'll find it's been done before, though." "Couldn't have been," explained Donald. "You see, I only thought of it tonight." "I don't think he ought to have any more to drink," said Leslie loudly. "Hush, dear," said Mother. "What do you intend to call it, Donald?" "I thought," said Donald owlishly, "I thought I would call it The Suddenly Book." A very trenchant title, said Larry. I feel, however, that your main characters could be padded out a little bit, in depth, as it were, before you get them all tangled up on the sofa. Yes, said Donald, you could well be right. Well, that is interesting, said Mother, sneezing violently. And now I think we really all ought to have a cup of tea. I will make the tea for you, Mother, said Max, leaping to his feet and starting all the dogs barking again. I will help you, said Donald. Margot dear, you had better go with them and just make sure they find everything, said Mother. When the three of them had left the room, Mother looked at Larry. And these are the people, she said coldly, you say are not eccentric? Well, Donald's not eccentric, said Larry. He's just a bit high. And suddenly, he was drunk, intoned Leslie, putting some more logs on the fire and kicking it into some semblance of a blaze. They are both of them very good chaps, said Larry. Donald's already laid half of Corfu by its ears. What do you mean? Said Mother. Well, you know how the Corfiotes love to worm every hidden secret out of you, said Larry. They're all convinced that since he appears to have private means and is so incredibly British, that he must have a terribly posh background. So he has been amusing himself by telling them all different stories. He has so far, I have been assured, been the eldest son of a duke, the cousin of the Bishop of London, and the illegitimate son of Lord Chesterfield. He has been educated at Eton, Harrow, Oxford, Cambridge, and to my delight, this morning Mrs. Papanopoulos assured me that he had assured her that his formal education had been undertaken at Girton. Just at that moment, Margot came back into the drawing room, looking slightly distraught. I think you had better come and do something with them, Larry, she said. Max has just lighted the kitchen fire with a £5 note, and Donald has disappeared and keeps shouting "Cooey" at us, and we can't see where he's gone. All of us trooped down to the gigantic stone-flagged kitchen, where a kettle was starting to sing on one of the charcoal fires, and Max was contemplating woefully the charred remains of a £5 note, which he held in one hand. Really, Max, said Mother, what a silly thing to do. £5 was quite a bit of money in those days, comparatively. Anyway, Max beamed at her. No expense spared for Mother, he said, and then, pressing the remains of the fiver into her hand, keep it, Mother, as a souvenir. Cooey, came a doleful, echoing cry. That's Donald, said Max proudly. Where is he? Said Mother. I don't know, said Max. Then he wants to hide. He wants to hide. Leslie strode to the back door and flung it open. Donald, he called, are you there? Cooey, came a quavering cry from Donald with subtle, echoing overtones. Christ, said Leslie, the silly bastard's fallen down the well. In the garden at the back of the kitchen there was a large well, some 50 feet deep, with a thick round iron pipe running right down the shaft. From the echoing qualities of Donald's voice, we were quite sure that Leslie's guess was right. Carrying a lamp, we made our way hurriedly up to the edge of the well and peered in a circle down into its dark depths. Halfway down the pipe was Donald, his arms and legs entwined firmly around it. He gazed up at us. "Cooey," he said coyly. "Donald, don't be a bloody fool," said Larry exasperatedly. "Come up out of there. If you fall into that water, you'll drown. Not that I worry about that, but you'll pollute our entire water supply." "Shan't," said Donald. "Donald," said Max, "vivant you. Come, it's cold down there. Come and have some tea with Mother, and we will talk more about your book." "Do you insist?" asked Donald. Yes, we insist," said Larry impatiently. Slowly and laboriously, Donald climbed up the pipe while we watched him breathlessly. When he was within easy reach, Max and the entire family leaned over the well, grabbed various portions of his anatomy, and hauled him to safety. When we escorted our guests back into the house and plied them with vast quantities of hot tea until they seemed as sober as they were likely to be without having slept. "I think you had better go home now," said Larry firmly, "and we'll meet you in town tomorrow." We escorted them out onto the veranda. The cab stood with the horse drooping forlornly between the shafts. The cab driver was nowhere to be seen. "Did they have a cab driver?" Larry asked of me. I said that quite honestly I had been so captivated by the sight of their candelabras that I had not noticed. "I will drive," said Max, "and Donald shall sing to me." Donald arranged himself carefully in the back of the cab with the candelabras, and Max took to the driving seat. He cracked the whip in a most professional manner, and the horse aroused itself from its comatose condition, gave a sigh, and then shambled off down the drive. "Good night," shouted Max, waving his whip. We waited until they had disappeared from sight behind the olive trees, and then trooped back inside the house with sighs of heartfelt relief. Closed the front door. "Really, Larry, you shouldn't invite people at this hour of the night," said Mother. "I didn't invite them at this hour of the night," said Larry, annoyed. "They just came. I invited them for drinks." Just at that moment, there was a thunderous knocking on the front door. "Well, I'm off," said Mother, and scuttled upstairs with considerable alacrity. Larry opened the front door, and there stood the distraught figure of the cab driver. "Where's my carroccino?" he shouted. "Where were you?" retorted Larry. "The curios have taken it." "They have stolen my carroccino?" shouted the man. "Of course they haven't stolen it, foolish one," said Larry, now tried beyond endurance. "Because you weren't waiting here, they took it to get back into town. If you run quickly, you can catch them up." Imploring Saint Spiridion to help him, the man ran off through the olive trees and down towards the road. Determined not to miss the last act in this drama, I ran to a vantage point where I got a clear view of the entrance to our drive and a stretch of moonlit roadway which led into town. The cab had just left the drive and arrived on the road at a brisk walk. Donald and Max singing happily together. At that moment, the cab driver appeared through the olives and screaming imprecations. He started to run after them. Max, startled, looked over his shoulder. "Wolves, Donald," he shouted. "Hold tight." He proceeded to belabor the behind of the unfortunate horse, who, startled, broke into a gallop. But it was the sort of gallop that only a Corfu cab horse could achieve. It was just sufficiently fast to keep the cab owner running at full stretch some 10 paces behind the cab. He was shouting and imploring and almost weeping with rage. Max, determined to save Donald at all costs, was belabouring the horse unmercifully, while Donald leaned over the back of the cab and shouted "bang" at intervals. And thus they disappeared out of my sight along the Corfu road. The following morning at breakfast, all of us felt slightly jaded, and Mother was lecturing Larry severely for allowing people to turn up at 2 a.m. for drinks. Just at that moment, Spiro's car drove up to the front of the house, and he waddled onto the veranda where we were sitting, clasping in his arms an enormous, flat, brown paper parcel. "This is for yours, Mrs. Durrells," he said. "For me?" said Mother, adjusting her spectacles. "What on earth can it be?" She unwrapped the brown paper cautiously, and there inside, as bright as a rainbow, was the biggest box of chocolates I had ever seen in my life. Pinned to it was a little white card on which had been written in a rather shaky hand, "With apologies for last night, Donald and Max." Well, that was gracious and civilised at least. It's amazing what sobering up can do for one, by all the gods. Right. No, I shall read that chapter tomorrow. Hasta mañana, till we meet again, to quote ABBA or something like that. Have a beautiful day, afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are in the space-time continuum, and remember to smile like a spade-footed toad, something like that. But smile genuinely, authentically, and let your love be extruded and real and life-affirming and comforting and kind ways, and slough off the rest. Bye for now.